At this point, Crosser is a construction worker.
Yes.
Bob is doing his own thing, mostly at the motel, but
No,
is he at Shelby's yet?
No, he's working at Carol Shelby's.
He's at Shelby's.
Original Cobra factory in Venice.
Okay, and
California.
you're basically a full-time student
And I'm a full-time
at
student.
Santa Monica City College,
And I got a part-time job.
at the Honda dealership and stuff.
No, that came later.
Okay,
At this point, I'm probably working at my dad's shop, maybe part-time, or I'm not sure where I was working.
okay.
He'd throw me out from time to time.
So you all have full-time commitments to either education or work, and you're building this at nights and on weekends.
Oh, yeah,
And,
exactly. Yes. Let's see, I think Skinner is at Shelby's at this point. If not, he might have been working. He worked at my dad's shop, and of course he got thrown out too, just like me. He worked at other machine shops, and then he got a job as the number 2 man at Shelby's, Carol Shelby's, with just a crafty devil who ran the machine shop, and Bob Skinner was his assistant. What a guy the guy who ran the shop was. His name was Malin Lamoureux. What a peach. I could talk about him for a long time.
Now,
Malin helped us a lot too, this guy, Malin Lamoureux. He helped us a lot.
I think it's important to note that this is the first time the car has seen sunshine. Straight out of the garage, brand spanking new. Here it is.
Yes.
From the motor back, it never changed.
Never changed.
Never changed. Through all the years, through all the success, through the continual lowering of the ET and the upping of the mile an hour, it was basically this car. The front end lengthened a couple of times.
From the firewall forward, from the back of the engine forward is the only part that ever got changed.
Yeah.
Some people say that we moved the rear end. I don't remember that we did, and I don't think we did, but boy, some of their evidence is sure convincing.
I've seen some photos where it looks like the axle has moved forwards a little bit.
But then the tires got bigger, so I don't know.
It's hard to say.
I don't think we moved it, but I can't argue against those who say.
Do you
we
think
did.
maybe when it was at a Who's Our Shop, he did you a little favor and didn't tell you about it, and may have moved
No,
it?
nothing happened without us knowing
Yeah.
about it. There was no monkey business on our deal. We ran our car like Mrs. Skinner ran her Red Apple Motel.
In talking about Mrs. Skinner, you've told me a few stories about, as an innkeeper, there is some nonsense that occurs at the property, and sometimes you can use that nonsense to your advantage to call in favors later. There were times at the Red Apple where perhaps you were welding in the garage and people complained or making a lot of noise, and the police would show up, and Mrs. Skinner just put the kibosh on that instantly through knowing the fire chief and knowing the police chief. It was almost the ideal place to build this car.
Yeah, the police were never involved. We did have a little scrape or two with the fire department, but like you say, things happen in a motel, and people end up being very indebted to the innkeeper. And without going into any details,
No need to.
and of course, Mrs. Skinner would never ever tell you that she had saved you. But we found out years later about some of these things. We marveled at the fact that we were in deep trouble, and then the trouble would vanish, and we couldn't figure out what happened. But later we found out she made it happen.
Wow.
But it'd be good if we didn't talk about
Yes.
some of these.
So the car was only started actually one time at the motel.
Right.
You-
One time in this configuration.
Right. You took it up to the end of Princeton,
Yes.
turned it around.
Which is the side street.
Right. This is Princeton right here.
Okay.
And you said the street looked very much the same.
Yeah. This is the city blocks are real long in Santa Monica in this part of town. Very long. Oh, maybe 1.5 or 2 real city blocks. And this is going uphill. So the motel's down here. We come out, turn, go up, go way up about as far as you can see, and turn around at the cross street.
And it's a very big cross street. You can loop around. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big, same size street as this, but going the other way. So we make a U-turn at the top, and Jimmy Crosser's in the car in this configuration. We fire it up coming down this street, and so it fires up right about, say, in here.
Yeah,
It
the
fires up.
motel is just off to the side here.
Yeah, and there's an alley that goes through the middle of the motel that he's going to turn into. That was the first time it ever fired up. Of course, we were just,
And who was there beaming the most?
well,
Mrs. Skinner.
yeah. Jimmy Crosser pulls in the alley, and the alley separated the old part of the motel with the new part of the motel.
This is a City of Santa Monica engineering drawing that I found
Okay.
that shows the placement of the motel.
Okay. Wilshire units. Okay, this is Princeton Street out here. And so we fire up, we turn around at this corner, we come down the street, fire up, 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 up. And Jimmy turns in here. Let's see if I got this right. Yeah, he turns in here, and the office is right here. This is the street out here. This is Wilshire Boulevard down here. And this little alley comes through here, and the old part of the motel's up here, the new part's down here. Jimmy pulls in here, and Mrs. Skinner comes out of the office, and she is just beaming. Things running, and the people are pouring out of these units, and they are hot. And the older part of the motel is people rented them by the month or a week, whatever. And the other part was a regular motel, rent by the day. This the bottom part.
So they were, you could almost call them permanent residents
Yes.
that live there.
So these people are really offended that somebody is making noise in their neighborhood, right? Well, they come roaring out of these units, and here's Mrs. Skinner standing on the porch of the office, just beaming. They took one look at how happy she was, and they thought about how unhappy they were, and then they probably thought about how unhappy they were going to be when she threw them out if there was any problem. So they all just shut up, turned around, and went back and grumbled and went back into their units, right? And our garages were underneath this building here. This was the new part, big building. And underneath here is where the garages were, and that we had the first 2 underneath here. And the car's sitting about here, running, with Mrs. Skinner smiling.
Now, Tom, since we're trying to be as historically as accurate as possible with this little documentary, one of the first stories of surfer folklore is when you finally got the car to the track and you got it teched, and teched was basically a loose term that whoever was inspecting the car would have a clear conscience if you wadded it up and hurt yourself, that you tried to get the car started and you pushed it half the day and you couldn't get the car started. And since you didn't come up through the ranks like stock, super stock, you just showed up with a fueler and nobody really knew who you were, it was quite a day at the track. So can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't really remember all of that happening. It probably did happen, but I don't remember it. But then I think we all have the ability to selectively remember. Okay, so we roll up, and when you came into Long Beach, the spectators went to the right, the competitors went to the left, and in the first kind of area that you came into was just sort of an empty area where you stored trailers, parked extra cars, and then there was a scale where you weigh the cars. So you pull up there, unload, put your car up on the scale, they weigh it. And I don't know who the tech inspector was, because we didn't know who anybody was. Because then, like when you raced in the stock class, you didn't do, none of this happened, right? I mean, they might look, okay, is this thing stock? open the hood, that kind of stuff. But this time they're looking at it because they're thinking, are these guys, are they going to kill herself here, right? So they're looking the thing over and trying to figure out if we're there, if this thing's really ready to go as fast as it probably can go. First time the car runs, I think it goes 175 or something, let's say, which is fast enough to do a lot of damage to a person, I guess. And so anyway, we go up there and they're looking at us and they're looking at the car and they're shaking things and they're looking at us. And as you said, the guy has to come up, his conscience has to get cleared that these guys are probably not going to kill themselves or anybody else. Then finally, okay, you're good to go. I think maybe they critiqued a few things. I'm not sure, but we didn't have to change anything. I don't believe.
And during these times, you didn't even. There was no such thing as a competition license.
No.
You just showed up and ran.
Yes. You didn't. I don't think you even needed a regular. A license to drive on the street. I think. I don't. I mean, I wasn't a driver, so I don't know the details.
But those part of the rules were pretty lax.
Well, there weren't any rules.
Yeah.
And then when it came to Top Fuel drag racing, there wasn't, or I guess they called it Top Fuel, did they? I don't know.
Double A fuel dragster.
Or Double A. Double A was unlimited fuel dragster. And so we weren't claiming it was an A fuel or a B fuel dragster. It's just a Double A fuel dragster. So there isn't any rules other than safety rules. And I don't know. I guess that was about it. So finally, they just look at us and go, well, I guess you're okay. Go ahead, They do, oh boy, we're happy then. Into the pits we go. And new cars at the drag strip, new dragster teams were a dime a dozen. They just happened all the time. 2, 3, 4 guys get together, run out of brains, build this dragster, off to the races they go, and all the other people are going, who's this guy? Who's this bunch, And you were welcome, very welcome. Now, that's a good point to talk about too. Is drag racing is the only motorsport I've ever been involved with where everybody is welcome. They don't care what color you are, what anything. Just come, act decent, have a good time. And so we were just as welcome as anybody else. You just roll in, and no one's offering to help you, but you don't look like you need any help because you don't look like you know what you're doing, right? You look like you're just kind of lost in there. And so everybody just stands back and watches. And so if we were having trouble getting it started, they probably just watched and went, they're having trouble getting it started. Right? And I'm sure that if we went over and asked any one of them, could you give us a tip here? Or, oh, sure. I'm sure they would have, maybe not all of them, but it wouldn't have taken 2 minutes to get some help on the first day there, right?
And on this first day, who was the driver? Was it Goob or was
I think it was Roy Goob Tuller. His nickname was Goob. He was kind of compact. He still is. I mean, great guy. He's from Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, he somehow got the nickname as a child, Goober, as Goober as in peanut. Or at least that was my understanding of it. Anyway, I think it was Goob. And Goob, he worked at Engel Cams in Santa Monica. Very helpful, just a great guy. And I think he did it just to help us get going, just because, we'd come around and ask questions. And, we obviously used Engel stuff. If you were from Santa Monica, you used Engel stuff.